Thanks for tuning in to another episode of From Funding to Fame, where we interview the founders and funders currently raising capital on FrontFundr, as well as experts in the private capital markets. I'm your host, Trieste Redding, the head of campaigns at FrontFundr, and I'm excited to introduce more Canadians to equity crowdfunding. This podcast episode features conversations about a business's current operations and future plans, and as a result may contain forward-looking information. There can be no assurance that forward-looking information will prove to be accurate, as actual results and future events could differ materially from those anticipated in such statements. Listeners should not place undue reliance on forward-looking information. Today we are here with the founder and CEO of HOVR, Harrison Amit. HOVR is an innovative rideshare startup set to revolutionize the Toronto mobility and transport scene with its unique membership model for drivers, allowing them to take home 100% of the fares they earn. This groundbreaking approach addresses the number one issue in the rideshare industry today: low pay for drivers. Not only does it empower drivers, but it also ensures riders pay less, fostering a more equitable ecosystem in the rideshare industry. Since its incorporation in 2020, HOVR has been prioritizing transparency and fairness to revolutionize the rideshare industry. With a launch in May 2024, here are some highlights. Once they have proven the financial viability of HOVR in Toronto, they plan to expand into the US and select markets and other Canadian provinces, where the North American rideshare market is expected to grow to $35 billion by 2025. HOVR has the lowest platform fees compared to companies like Uber and Lyft, with their biggest differentiator being fair pay for driver earnings, ensuring that drivers receive equitable compensation for their services. Over 48,000 drivers submitted applications in the first 4 months of operation, and over 36,000 riders have downloaded the HOVR app primarily through word of mouth. HOVR, along with its 29-year-old founder, Harrison Amit, have received a tremendous welcome in the media, including coverage from CBC, The Rideshare Guy, and a host of other highly visible media networks and platforms. Hi, Harrison. Thanks so much for being here today. Welcome to From Funding to Fame. How are you doing?
Hey, thanks for having me. I'm doing great.
We're very excited to learn a bit more about your background, learn more about HOVR. I know you guys have had a pretty big year with launching the platform, so really excited to dive in. Before we kind of kick things off too much, would love to hear a little bit more about yourself, kind of your journey to becoming a founder and what your backgrounds look like so far.
Sure, yeah. So my name is Harrison. I'm the founder and CEO of HOVR. I'm originally from Stellarton, Nova Scotia, which is a small town on the east coast of Canada. I moved to Toronto in 2018 and started my journey in the entrepreneurial space in the health and wellness industry. And then moving up to Toronto, I decided to start kind of venturing into the tech space. And I've been working as a consultant for a number of different tech companies. And as a result of going to 2 or 3 different meetings per day in a new city, I defaulted to using rideshare services, on-demand drivers, if you will, to be able to get around. And through hundreds of conversations with fantastic drivers across the board over the first few years of being in Toronto, I saw an opportunity and a space for a Canadian competitor to come in and do things a little bit differently than what we've seen in the ride sharing industry up to date. So a little bit about me, where I'm from, and where HOVR came about.
That's amazing. It's always nice when you hear more about kind of how yourself as an individual saw this problem and this opportunity, and really with your background and expertise are able to come in and provide a new solution. So would love it if you can give us a bit of an overview of what HOVR does, and I guess just more about that initial spark or inspiration where you not just saw the opportunity, but you're like, we can really make something here.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So as I mentioned, when I moved to Toronto, I chose kind of rideshare services as my primary way of getting around. You just download an app. I love the simplicity of it. We didn't have it out in Nova Scotia at the time, so it was brand new to me, but just a really great experience overall. Getting from point A to point B, being on time for my meetings, and having a comfortable, safe ride along the way. All of these things were, things that jumped out to me as a fundamental fabric of our society, because people are always going to places, and with the increased cost of vehicle ownership, I mean, it makes sense if you live in a city that you may look at alternative modes of transportation. So, there was that initial spark, if you will, through conversations with drivers. And then I started taking shared rides, which is when I had conversations with my co-riders about why they would choose one platform or the other. And then after learning that there was really no brand loyalty behind the decision-making process, it kind of confirmed that there would be a space for a Canadian competitor to come in and foster kind of a greater sense of community in cities around the world, starting in Canada and expanding out, in a thoughtful way to markets where we saw a disparity in the drivers' communities, where there was an increasing level of dissatisfaction on the driver's side, and over the years, an increasing level of dissatisfaction from the rider side of the market as well. So, where did it start? You could say beginning of 2020, that fantastic time when everybody thought that nothing would happen and then the whole world shut down. But I saw it as a bit of a blessing in disguise because, it's great to have a thought on an idea and to maybe make a logo and put it on a hat and start talking to investors. But the shutdown actually gave me the time that I required to become more of a subject matter expert in the industry and coherently put together a business plan that would capitalize on that initial spark that I had identified, an opportunity in the market for that Canadian competitor to come through, and then really build upon that through talking with different stakeholders, advocacy groups, even Co-ops Ontario. Had great dialogue back and forth with them, some of the worker unions, just understanding how member-based organizations work. And what makes us different than the other platforms, Trist, is that HOVR employs a membership model for the drivers. So instead of the driver losing a very sizable percentage of their earnings to the platform, they actually get to keep 100% of the fare, which we transparently describe the fare and the fees as two separate pieces of the puzzle. And as a member, we believe that 100% fare is 100% fare, which results in the riders paying less and the drivers earning more. And I mean, what more could you ask for? All right.
Absolutely. I really like the tagline that you kind of developed with that 100% fair is 100% fair. I think it's a great, easy way to understand really your mission, your positioning, which is fantastic. So kind of jumping ahead a little bit, I know you talk about your aim to be completely transparent with your drivers. You allow them to keep that 100% of the fare, and this value proposition really, as you noted, does differentiate yourself in the market from what other players have been doing. So I guess a question, does the better experience for the drivers also lead to a better experience for the rider?
Yeah, that's a great question. I really appreciate it. We have a philosophy at Hover: happy driver, happy rider. So how do we provide a ride above the rest, that Hover hospitality experience? And it starts with paying the people behind the wheel properly so that they're incentivized to actually go above and beyond and go that extra mile, if you will. And all of the puns that I just listed are 100% intended. So, it's been observed in our rides that, there's a ton of gratitude between the rider and the driver. The drivers are thanking the riders for using Hover and as a Canadian option in the rideshare space. The riders are thankful to the platform that the drivers are being paid properly. Our early adopters have been so supportive of our mission, and it stands true that if you want anybody in any role to go above and beyond, they need to be properly incentivized, and that starts with the money that you take home to put food on the table and take care of your family. So that was our philosophy. That will be our philosophy, and we're really excited about the current traction and velocity that we've been able to stir up in the city of Toronto since we had our soft launch at the beginning of May this year.
It's fantastic. I do want to touch on that a bit more. Obviously, it's been a big year for you, kind of launching in the Toronto market. And I think just some of the numbers that you've had are pretty incredible in terms of the number of drivers who have signed up for this. It just shows clearly, I think, how many drivers want this solution in the market. So maybe you can talk through kind of what that launch and kind of the months since then have looked like for you as a company.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I'll even dial it back a little bit to the year prior to launch, where a lot of time was focused on building equity with the driver groups, the advocacy groups, and understanding what their real pain points were and what their messaging was and what they'd like to see changed in the industry, and how, you know, as the corporate platform, we could participate in helping to facilitate that change, whether it be in the regulatory space or just fundamentally how the industry moves. We spent a lot of time with key people in different groups to be able to understand exactly what we should be delivering to the market. And that time spent was incredibly well served, because it resulted in us being able to build up our first initial wait list prior to launch of around 5,000 drivers, which was incredible. And so, we predicted, okay, maybe half of them will convert when we do our soft launch, and we'll be able to, get the ball rolling with a couple hundred drivers, grow up to the end of our first year with a couple thousand drivers, and we'll go from there. But what ended up happening after May 2nd of this year, 2024, was astonishing to the entire HOVR team. And, it was a great problem to have, but it resulted in us having to move aggressively fast to accommodate. In the first 48 hours, there was an additional 8,000 drivers who signed up and downloaded the app, which was, fantastic. It was really an exercise of getting the HOVR brand out there, getting the HOVR app out there into the ecosystem, past our, testing phase with a couple hundred drivers, and being able to get into the live market with thousands of drivers to see how we're received and how we perform. By the end of May, we had over 20,000 drivers who had signed up and downloaded the app, which, again, we were just blown. We've now, double, triple, quadrupled the projections for the year in our first month. And at this point, we stand with over 2,000 drivers who have been fully approved onto the platform, because we do have a little bit of an approval process to become a member. It's not as straightforward as just signing up. This isn't just for anybody. We are looking to work with the best of the drivers who are currently on the road providing, rideshare services. And we've got an additional 48,000 drivers on our wait list who are, eager to hop on. But we're intimately aware of the reality that we need to be able to increase ridership before we start flooding the market with drivers. One of the main pain points of the industry is that there are too many registered drivers in a small geography, with not enough demand in ridership to give drivers a meaningful income, right? So it's something that we work through at HOVR, hand in hand with the regulators, hand in hand with the advocacy groups who have been fighting for the change, and looking to even collaborate with the other platforms to figure out what this looks like in academia, to make sure that we provide an ecosystem that's a legitimate platform of opportunity for drivers versus everybody getting a smaller and smaller piece of the same pie.
No, that makes a lot of sense, and I think the value proposition that you're bringing to the market for drivers is certainly quite exceptional. And I think, as you noted, it's how do you balance both sides of the marketplace as well? So I know you're obviously still working on that customer adoption and growing it. Would love to hear a little bit about, just as you went through that launch process, what was it like getting the riders on board, in addition to having obviously that great demand from the drivers?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the initial kind of soft launch got picked up by major media outlets and gave us national coverage, which was incredible, a little unintentional, but resulted in a lot of people flooding onto our platform thinking that we were available across Canada, when in fact we were really just launching in Toronto. But getting the ridership up in Toronto has been a little bit of a charmed experience, in the sense that our drivers are the biggest advocates of HOVR. While they drive for the other platforms, they're happily promoting HOVR to their riders, and riders are thrilled to hear that there is a Canadian competitor in the space, keeping Canadian dollars in Canada, keeping Canadian data in Canada, and for all intents and purposes, keeping the Canadian dream in Canada for our drivers, right? So riders who find out about us, who discover HOVR, are super keen on hopping on board and downloading the app and giving us a try. At this point, just due to the massive number of drivers that have come on board, we do need a huge huge influx of riders, which is where we've been looking to make some strategic partnerships to help with corporate adoption of their employees taking hover rides, above and beyond just the drivers getting the word out and our core digital marketing strategies. We look to foster more and more relationships with influencers who are, local to the city and the GTA, that can speak to the different communities who choose rideshare as an option. We know that last year, 10 million Canadians used rideshare in some capacity at some point of the year. So, the opportunity is there. It's massive, and it's really just about getting the word out there in a meaningful way and making sure that everybody discovers Hover.
Absolutely. Now, I know you touched on the fact that obviously you guys have had a successful launch in Toronto so far. You're not yet available everywhere in Canada. Obviously, there's opportunities for growth there. And I think, just as people who have used rideshare, we all have a pretty large understanding that it really is a global thing. You've got big players, Uber, Lyft, who have really been able to build this market. So I'd be interested to hear a little bit more, of what the market opportunity is, with how you guys are doing things differently and how you plan to capture some of that market share from those big players.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, we're incredibly lucky that they did all the heavy lifting for us. I often say they spent billions so that we could spend millions. It's not going to be a small endeavor by any means, but it's not going to be anything near what the incumbents went through in order to establish this market for us to come in and capitalize on. The market opportunity is really about providing a ride above the rest, like I mentioned earlier, and curating the experience with newer vehicles, experienced drivers, that touch of hover hospitality that you'll get when you get into a hover, and providing that personalized experience through the app that you'll start to see in Hover 2.0. Right now, our Hover 1.0 version is really just a reflection of that initial product getting into market, to be able to start the feedback loops that we needed to have with both sides of the marketplace to put out a product that was really reflective of the change that people would like to see in this industry, where you can almost look at the competitors as legacy systems and of course the OGs of the space, but there's a lot of room to innovate on the rider experience, and it all starts by taking care of the driver, right? Because if you don't have drivers, you're not in the race. So, I like to remind the drivers frequently in our, monthly calls that we still have. We invite them to openly talk to our executive team and ask questions in an AMA format, so that they can all, stay tuned as to what we're doing at Hover and where we're going, and also be able to contribute to our growth themselves, and as we grow together as a community. But sorry, I lost my train of thought there. I was saying that the opportunity is to provide a better experience overall, and it really does start with the driver.
Absolutely. No, I think we've even seen with some of the larger players in the industry, when you're not taking care of the drivers and the culture even behind the company, it can have a large impact for sure. And you guys are definitely doing things the right way, which is fantastic. I think a question on a lot of people's mind with the fact that drivers get 100% of the fare, what is the business model for Hover? How do you guys as a company make money?
Yeah, no, absolutely. And that's another very valid question. 100% of the fare this is when my hands start to come out and I got to break things down. So the fare is very much from the taxi industry, right? A base rate, a per kilometer rate, and a per minute rate. That is what the driver gets. Now, this is similar to our competitors. As of recent, they started using some algorithmic, determinants that, to be honest with you, is even worse for the drivers than what they were getting before. But that's a whole other set of questions that maybe we can talk about later. But right now, what we're focusing on is the fare. So this fare that the driver gets is calculated based off of those determinants, base, kilometers, and time. They keep 100% of that. The reality of the ecosystem in this industry is that there are fees. There's a city fee, an insurance fee, a platform fee, and a connection fee. And that platform fee is what comes to us. And that allows us to provide the customer service, the customer support, the cybersecurity, and everything that's auxiliary and in addition to those, core component fees that come through. So we make our money on the platform fee. The membership is great, but our strategy is to invest the membership revenue into marketing that drives ridership. That monthly reoccurring revenue that we get allows us to do targeted and predictable marketing based off of our customer acquisition cost, specifically our rider acquisition cost, because we've kind of already got the drivers that we need. So the space and the unit economics break down to that dollar per ride that we really take home as a platform fee. And it's all about scale. 5,000 drivers doing 10 rides a day is where we reach that profitability target. It is a lot of rides per day, but that is exactly where we are heading in the direction of.
Well, really appreciate you outlining that all so clearly. That's a great overview of the business model. So thank you for providing some clarity there. I know we've touched on as well just kind of what the numbers have looked like so far, how much demand there's been on the driver side. You guys have had some great press coverage as you did your launch in Toronto there. So would love to learn a little bit more about just the traction that the company's had to date, and then what those continued plans for growth and that future development for Hover looks like.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, an interesting metric I think to mention would be the size of the team and the growth, right? So we started with a core team of 12 people, and now we are in and around 35 members of our Hover family, if you will. And it's going to have to keep growing just at the rate that things are moving. We're incredibly excited to see some of the partnerships that are aligning with us from the corporate perspective. um, Without giving too much away, what we did was we reflected, again, I'm going to go back to the driver. How can we take care of the driver in a way that's more than just the platform? So we know how to help you make more money. How can we help you save money? And, what does a driver actually need? So they need a phone, they need insurance, they need, different member benefits, if you will. And so going to the table with, and they need a car, of course. So going
Mhm.
to the table and going to bat with, all these household brand names that everybody knows that can provide these to our drivers. Being that Canadian company in the space has resonated deeply with these corporate partners. And we're really excited over the months to come to announce these partnerships, to provide these member benefits, and to in turn get access to some degree their communities. And as I said, they are household names, so a lot of people would be on their email lists, on their social medias, and tapped into their platforms. And it's again all about discovering Hover and getting the word out there through these partnerships while providing a benefit to our drivers. So there's that exchange of value that's seen, and we look to build long-term and lasting and meaningful partnerships, not just kind of the surface level stuff that tends to happen at the transactional level. And again, it's all about keeping that Canadian dream alive, and maintaining a good relationship across the board with both sides of the market. So those are a few indicators of our growth. You mentioned the press. There's been a lot of coverage across the board. I had the pleasure of being on the Rideshare, the largest rideshare YouTube channel, and being interviewed by Sergio and his partner, and speaking to them a little bit about Hover. They are predominantly a US audience, which consequently has resulted in us having pockets of drivers all over the US, and even in different parts of the world signing up on our wait list on the website. So, we're starting to build a heat map of where the drivers who are interested in Hover may be, and as a key indicator for, future growth to come. Because as I mentioned, a huge amount of our initial traction and success is, directly driven by the drivers who have been an incredible recruitment tool for riders, while they're driving for the others, to just get them to jump board and discover Hover.
That's fantastic. I want to touch on a little bit more kind of yourself and your founder story. I think you're obviously a younger founder. I feel like you're really that kind of next generation leader, and the company's kind of traction and growth so far is really impressive. So would love to hear more on just your philosophy on leadership and really how you're kind of guiding and motivating your team.
Okay, sure. So, it's I get that a lot. I just turned 29 and this is my third company. So I've had a little bit of experience leading in positions of leadership, and I've definitely learned a lot over the years. My second company was actually a consulting practice, and it worked with a number of different startups at different levels, whether if it was directly with the founders or the C-suite team or the middle managers to help them, reach their KPIs. I try to insert myself as a tool for success, and take the approach of under promising and over delivering, because word of mouth was my big kind of vector to land new clients. And as I've mentioned a few times here, word of mouth is going to be huge for us in any market that we enter and look to grow in. So when it comes to putting together a team, putting together a product, and getting the vision set forward, I like to lead any of my entrepreneurial ventures with the same theme, which is how many people can I help, and what's the impact that we're making in these individuals' lives as we are looking to help, right? So, when you look at who is behind the wheel of the car, which is predominantly a newcomer to Canada, they're looking to get situated in a new country. They're facing a ton of different challenges, and to be able to support that demographic with a platform of opportunity, it actually has a ripple effect beyond borders when we go down the rabbit hole of really how this impacts people. But it's also a major component of the fabric of society. I think I touched upon that a little bit earlier. And HOVR can really be an economic engine for the countries that it operates in. So there's a lot of layers of impact that I explore when I look at any entrepreneurial opportunity. But when I was coming up with the path forward for HOVR, the whole spectrum of impact was just abundant. And from, like I mentioned, the economy to the environment to society, these are all key pillars of impact that I think every founder should really question themselves on. What am I really doing here? Like what happens above and beyond the profit of the business model, and what does this do for people? And that thought process allows you to not only go to bed late and wake up early as an individual, but attract key people to your team that you're going to need to help you get there, because you can't do it alone. You do need a strong team of people. I've been incredibly lucky that we've been able to attract such a great diverse group of leadership to the HOVR team, the HOVR family, that are really helping push this forward on all fronts. So yeah, I mean, I hope I answered your question. It's a little bit of how I think about things, and how I aim to inspire others to think about things for the future generation of founders who will be bringing products and services to market.
It's great. I think the questions that you're kind of asking yourself are really questions that anyone should be asking when going into business. Really, what's that impact that we're having, and looking at those different stakeholder groups. So I think that's a great approach. And one question I really like to just ask all founders as well is just on your kind of journey so far with the company, has there been like a defining moment that stands out to you, or perhaps just, your favorite moment that you've experienced so far that you kind of look back on with fondness?
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of those moments, but I think the one that I'll highlight for the purpose of our conversation today is getting into the first HOVR ride for myself. Like I facilitated the kind of inaugural ride as the at our soft launch event, but when I was able to actually open the HOVR app, book a ride, on a Friday night, and get a driver come pick me up at my place and take me where I needed to go. That was a really refreshing feeling. I did my best to hide my identity so the driver wouldn't know who I was, but I guess he recognized my voice from the interview that I had done, and he quickly called me out but he was incredibly excited. And once he dropped me off, we pulled over and took a picture together. So it was a great experience. It was really refreshing. It felt like we'd really accomplished something, and immediately after that I realized we just got started. So it was an incredible experience, and I'm looking forward to reaching those other milestones like our Million Rides event, and expanding to different markets, and just continuing to experience the gratitude from drivers for doing the right thing.
That's an amazing moment for sure. Something I like to often ask entrepreneurs and business leaders as well is we know how busy it can be and how many hats you wear leading a startup. So, in the off chance that you have a moment where you're not working, what do you like to do?
Well, um, yeah, most recently, and I think I'll lean into this one, is spend some time with my colleagues. We'll actually go shoot some pool. It's been a great de-stressor. It's a nice kind of internal company culture competition that we have going against each other. Mostly me and my CTO, because he's really, really good at pool. But yeah, that's been the kind of, if there is time, when there is time, de-stressor that we all gravitate towards. Other than that, uh, in the last year, I moved out of the downtown core of Toronto and out to High Park area. And so going for walks in the park have been definitely a de-stressor. More often than not, as I'm going for my walk, I'll get a phone call, and it'll be a phone call meeting in the park, but it's it's still a nice refreshing moment to be out of the boardroom and be out of the office, and have the luxury of taking those calls while I'm in nature. So yeah.
That's great. I think there's been a rise in kind of health and wellness leaders in the space who have talked about the importance of walking meetings and things like that. So even if, it is your downtime and you don't necessarily want to be taking the call, that's probably a nice place to be able to do it and to still feel good for sure.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Now, turning the focus quickly a bit to the capital raise itself, would love to hear more about just what Hover's experience has been raising capital so far, and what some of your goals are with this community capital round through FrontFundr.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So um, the journey of Hover in terms of its funding history is that the first few years were actually self-funded by myself. I wanted to lay like a great foundation of, a product, as in the tech, and then the first kind of initial 1,000 drivers type of deal before I really started recruiting team members, and wanted to show something being there versus just, aspirational talk and organization around that aspiration. I wanted there to be something there. So the self-funded the first couple of years of Hover, and then did a family and friends round to kind of get us through the regulatory environment, and get over some of those financial hurdles. And then we got to the pre-seed round, which was right up to our leading up to our soft launch in May. And after that, we thought we'd be good for the rest of the year. But as I mentioned earlier, our traction and trajectory just took off. We shattered all projections in terms of driver acquisition and how we were going to grow in Toronto and the GTA. And so we jumped right into the seed round. But as a result of so many drivers coming on board and discovering Hover early, we had a flood of requests to invest early. Unfortunately, obviously, our drivers are, for the most part, not accredited investors. So it was challenging to respond to them and have to turn them away and say, unfortunately, we're a private company, we're not public, and, set perspectives. And then it really dawned on us that, hey, we should partner with FrontFundr, because the company had floated around a few times across my desk, and actually on LinkedIn, I believe, was really when it just kind of hit me. So we should do an equity crowdfund, and we've got a big enough community now that it would be great for us to get the drivers in on the ground floor. Right, so that's why we went to the lowest minimum that we could without challenging the FrontFundr team too much. But yeah, down to the minimum 250, $250 investment, which allowed a number of drivers to participate and get involved. And we're thrilled that, it's been such a great response. And it's been a great experience overall. Talking to different driver communities, holding the kind of Ask Me Anything webinars with the drivers as to why we're doing this and what it looks like for them. We always have the this isn't financial advice disclaimer going, but we do want them to understand that as we grow and as they work harder and harder to help us grow together, we want them to be part of the upside opportunity of an investment in a startup company, and not have to wait till we are officially public and miss out on all the multiples between today and that future date, right? So the total raise for the seed round is $3.4 million Canadian. We took 800,000 of that and siloed it into the crowd fund. And the other 2.6 is mostly focused on angel investors, family offices, and more institutional capital. So, we've had a great experience. We've got a number of subscription agreements signed and term sheets signed. The subscription agreements, we were actually just prior to launching the crowd fund. So, they're going to go hand in hand once we close everything up. And the term sheets are somewhat contingent on raising the entire amount of the 3.4 million. So we are, sharing and promoting and trying to get out there as much as we can about helping Canadians get invested into HOVR early. Our share price is 17 cents a share. So I think it's a really nice entry point for anybody who's looking to make an investment in a Canadian startup. And yeah.
That's fantastic. I think there really is a great fit with your drivers and obviously the connection that they have to the company, which is fantastic. I know you've touched on a couple times kind of keeping that Canadian dream alive, and not only are you doing that in how you're structuring your business, but the fact that you're able to give individuals an opportunity to take part in the company's growth is really exciting as well. I think our team was just talking yesterday, some of our investor relations team, that they've, heard from some of the drivers just how excited they are to invest and to get their wife to invest and to get a friend to invest. So I think you really feel that passion from the community of drivers that you have, and the excitement they have about becoming, co-owners in the company's future.
Yeah, absolutely. It's the other day I take a hover ride every day, and the other day I took a ride and it was one of the drivers who had invested, and he was so excited. Drivers aren't necessarily flush with capital. They've been
Yeah.
really abused by the other platforms and they struggled to kind of get ahead. But they've been able to, this individual was able to silo, the minimum 250, made the investment, and he said, next month I want to do another 250, and I'm so happy that this is going to be 3 months long because I'll be able to do another 250 at the end. So we're excited that drivers are looking at it from that perspective. Like, they don't have to put all their money up front. We don't want to put anybody in a financially stressful position. It's what you can do. And he told me he was just pushing an extra couple hours a day, with us and with the other platforms to get that, extra capital to be able to invest in HOVR. So, it's going to be a really interesting story when this is told in the future.
No, that's amazing. As we look to wrap things up here today, I always kind of like to leave with some closing remarks, both for founders and investors. So on the founder side, for any current or future founders who might be listening, is there perhaps one piece of advice that you've received that's guided you on your entrepreneurial journey, or maybe a quote that stuck with you?
Fall in love with the problem, not the solution. And that actually is the title of a book by Yuri Levine, the co-founder of Waze, which is one of the maps that we actually ended up using for the drivers in the back end of our application. And yeah, I mean, it's so true. A lot of people believe they have a solution, but they have not digested or properly fallen in love with the problem,
Yeah.
to have a solution that will last longer than a temporary band-aid to what they think the problem may be. So, that would be what I'd like to pass along to founders. It stuck with me. It's a great book. order it on Amazon. I don't have a link, so it's totally unsolicited, but yeah, just go check that one out. And great read, a lot of great points in there as well for founders and visionaries, just people looking to create change in an industry that may already have some fairly big players in it.
That's great advice. I think great kind of reference on the book there, and that's a really great perspective to have. I think for so many companies, especially those that really have a durable, lasting impact in an industry, is you inevitably grow and the solution changes, and you find different and better ways to solve that problem. So you have to be able to iterate on it, and I think that's a really great, succinct way of kind of summarizing that philosophy.
Cheers. You caught me off guard with it, but I hope that was a good final point. Yeah.
No, it's a great way of looking at that. Now, just last question, more so on the investor side, as we look to wrap things up today. If you could leave investors with three things to take away about your company, what would it be?
Highly scalable business, people powered, and we are taking care of the people. And when it comes to investing and having something in your portfolio that has an impact greater than profits, HOVR gives you the best of both worlds. So I encourage you to take a look at all of the information, not just the surface information. And I'll leave you with this thought of maybe wanting more. HOVR's a bit of a Trojan horse, and I'll leave that at the end.
Fantastic. A little bit of mystery and suspense at the end. I like it.
And if you want to
Well,
find out more, give me a call, sign an NDA, and we'll make it happen.
that's great. Well, Harrison, thank you so much for being here today. Really appreciate you answering our questions, sharing more about your journey and the capital raise with us. For those who do want to learn more about the offering, you can do so at frontfundr.com/HOVR. There are some great perks as part of the offering as well that I encourage individuals to check out. And as Harrison touched on, it's a very accessible minimum entry point for anyone considering the investment as well at $250. So great chance to learn and discover more about the organization. And yeah, Harrison, thanks again for being here today.
Hey, thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
For anyone new to the podcast, FrontFundr is Canada's leading equity crowdfunding platform, enabling all Canadians to invest in the most exciting startups and growth stage companies, something that was previously only available to the 1%. Subscribe to our weekly newsletter so you can have your questions answered in an upcoming episode. This podcast episode is for informational purposes only and should not constitute financial advice. Investors should conduct their own due diligence on any investment they may be considering on FrontFundr. For details of any offering listed on FrontFundr, refer to the offering document on their campaign page at www.frontfundr.com.